Their colleagues, they started like recording too early.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's bad. All right, good morning, everyone on Zoom and everybody in 103. Today, we're gonna talk for our coffee and conversation about subcontract monitoring and setup. So quickly reviewing our agenda for today, we're gonna talk a little bit about why we have a monitoring plan, what the roles and responsibilities are for CAIANH and others at the university, how to process a subcontract, the document retention guidelines, invoice tracking tips, and scope of work tracking. So let's jump into this. So why are we doing this now? The primary reason is the school recently had an internal audit that uncovered some issues with following the existing subrecipient monitoring plan. And so as a result of the audit, each unit was asked to establish their own plan that is in compliance with federal and university guidance. So the CAIANH plan, which we've previously shared, but we're going to share it again today to remind everybody, helps us ensure compliance with federal regulations and helps us prepare essential documentation in the event of an audit in the future. CAIANH has a lot of expertise, as you all probably know, with subcontracts and subrecipient monitoring due to our highly collaborative work on most of our projects. And so the plan that was developed for our unit has been presented to other units in the school and on campus. And I would go as far as to call it the gold standard for subrecipient monitoring. Yes. Because it's excellent. And and this is something that we put in place and keep track of really closely, but we should also be really proud of the system that was put in place. So thanks to the team for that.
So don't screw it up is what you're saying.
Right. Something like that. So this slide really tries to hit on some of the high points of the roles and responsibilities, starting at the left there with CU fiscal compliance. They provide an umbrella compliance check for all units, and they kind of monitor the overall audit environment, making suggestions or changes as needed to maintain compliance with federal and university guidelines. Next, OGC, they have a responsibility for the initial screening of the subrecipient site by doing a risk assessment, which we're going to talk a little bit more about here shortly. OGC also handles the responsibilities related to the outgoing subcontracts, reviewing draft language, negotiating terms, processing amendments. And then moving on to CAIANH, we're a partner to OGC in processing the subcontracts, and we spend and subsite spending to ensure compliance with federal and university guidance. The PI has the primary responsibility of being the point of contact with the subsite to ensure that work is being done in alignment with the sub-agreement and that invoices come in timely and work is progressing as planned. All right, roles and responsibilities. That's pretty hard to see, the risk assessment questionnaire, but it doesn't matter. It's just for a taste so you can see what the risk assessment questionnaire is. So we call it a RAQ, risk assessment questionnaire. It focuses on federal and federal flow-through funds, so subrecipients, that can be used to assess risk of our subrecipients. And it can be used regardless of the funding source. But for us, it's very often federal. This is something that OGC does for us and shares that information with us. And it's a tool to assist pass-through entities, in this case, that's CU, with determining the risk of a subrecipient. So this on the right side of the screen is the actual risk assessment questionnaire. As I said, the questions aren't super important. We aren't involved at this level, but I thought it would be helpful to see the kinds of questions that are asked of the subsites. And they have a pretty nuanced scoring rubric that we don't need to go into. But just know that the RAQ score, the lower the better for the RAQ score. So the lower score is the lower risk for the site. OGC does this RAQ assessment to meet the requirements laid out in the Code of Federal Regulations to evaluate a site's risk of potential noncompliance with federal statutes, regulations, and as well as university statutes and regulations, and the terms and conditions of the subaward. And then OGC scores this, as I said, if the site has a really pretty low RAC score, that means they're low risk, and that might mean that we only periodically ask for backup documentation for those sites, but we wouldn't routinely ask for it. If they're moderate to high risk on their scoring, then the subrecipient site would be required to provide a full transaction report for every invoice that they submit. Sometimes OGC might suggest that we shouldn't partner with a site because they're high risk. So sometimes that has happened. I don't know how often. I can think of one in recent memory. Is that right? Yeah. And we would then, as a department, make an assessment about whether we would be able to put supports in place and do some capacity building with that site to be able to work with them. And we would try to do that if we felt like the site was an essential partner for us. But it's always an option for us to say that we can't work with them because they're too high risk.
Great.
Great.
So now we're gonna talk a little bit about subcontract processing. So what we need to do when we need a new or amended subcontract. So I have an activity. So you guys, we're just gonna see if you can put these in order for how to process a subcontract. So I'll let you guys do that together. And then do you know how to get to the chat up here? I made it so the folks online can do it too. Hopefully. If not, I can just message you. So how do I put something?
There's a lot.
I just message you.
You guys want assistance?
Huh?
I don't know yet. There's more than we were expecting. Oh, geez. It just keeps going.
Our jobs are very complicated, as you all can see.
Yes, I don't envy, like, I don't want your guys' job.
Okay,
So Aaron, for Spiro and Jared, Aaron's gonna put in the chat a Google thing that you have to put the squares in order. Hopefully that'll work. And I'll just give you 5 minutes and go from there.
Yes.
So I'm,
That's it.
what am I doing with this Google form? Sorry.
Just move those squares around and try to put them in order from how to process a subcontract, a new subcontract.
All right.
Early too.
Oh, yeah.
And Aaron, how do I do? So. Oh, I see. You good? Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Submits what? Oh, jeez.
Uh-oh. You can write notes if it's not.
I was gonna say, these are slightly different than.
Are they?
So,
Oh, no.
It's drag these boxes or do
You
they-
should be able to. You can drag them all over.
I think somewhat early too.
Yeah.
You can probably help him.
Yeah. They can type in there too, so they can just number them.
That's true. Either way.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Is it working? Oh, cool.
One has moved.
Technology is not my favorite sometimes, so I'm figuring it
Yeah.
out.
You're doing great.
We've moved one box. We're so great.
The first time trying to include the people online.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, here's the draft agreement.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it really makes you see how many times it just goes back between us and
Yeah.
see.
This did take me, when I first learned it, took me a very long time to understand, so it's, yeah.
I just copy and paste. I have like template standard language that I use.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I know, but I was like, yeah, because the terms get confusing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I think maybe between the.
And the time I sent the agreement that wasn't signed yet, that Meg said.
Fiscal curtain.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never do that again.
I don't either.
And it was to Michelle, so.
Now they're getting it. Numbering works.
Cool.
Oh, nice.
The additional.
I'm guessing that comes before it's executed, so I know it's like here.
Yeah.
Just in case they need extra things before.
Okay, I think,
Let's check it
You're
out.
good? Okay.
Hold on, the Zoom folks aren't quite done yet. Give them just a second.
it could be totally wrong, but.
I can also put it up. Let me know when I should, Erin.
Okay.
I'm just gonna switch this. Okay. So first, you would collect the budget justification SOW, and then, once you have that, you submit through form stack.
Okay.
And then,
Middle column.
this goes here, because when you're starting a new subcontract, this is only like half of the documents, which we'll talk about in a second.
Okay.
And there's a bunch more that are kind of complicated that we reach out about.
Okay.
And then
Gotcha.
once we get that, we submit. And then where's the draft? The draft agreement to sub. Oh,
Oh, no, I think.
Yeah, that's right, okay.
Yeah.
And then subcontract signs and returns partially executed would go here. And then it's partially executed, so we send it to OGC,
I think there's one signature.
and then, where did this go? Oh, it's here. Wait. Okay.
Hey, Sarah, are
There
we
we
supposed to see something on the screen?
No, I'll do it in a second. Yeah, I can just do that. Wait, I'll do that. Okay. Is it right now?
Yep.
I was correcting there, Zoom. Okay, so this is what it should look like. So I'll just go through like key terms. Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we have the new NOA before we can do anything with a subcontract, which I think that you will all know at this point. So sometimes we really want to get started, but we have to have that NOA. And then the PI needs to collect the budget justification and scope of work. Because those are things that you need to communicate directly with the subcontract about and be in agreement on. And once you do that, that's when you would fill out the form stack for CAIANH fiscal. And for a new agreement at that point, CAIANH fiscal reaches out to the subcontract for additional documents. Those are just, more forms and more detailed documents that we need to set up the subcontract. Once we have that, we submit everything on a different form stack to OGC, and then they return to us, this is like a different terminology, so they return to us a draft agreement. So at that point, nothing is signed, things can still be revised. And then we send that over to the subcontract. We don't usually include the PI in this at all, because it's just like a bunch of back and forth, and it's usually pretty technical, and at this point, we know what it should look like. In some cases, the subcontract might have some revisions, and CAIANH fiscal we have no ability to edit the contracts. So at that point, we have to go back to OGC, they edit, we go back and forth. So usually there's not too many edits, and then once the subcontract confirms the agreement, they'll sign it and send it back to us. And at that point, it is a partially executed agreement because it's been signed by one party. And then we send it to OGC, they review it, approve it, which is that's the point of the process that takes a while. So they review it and approve it, and then they sign it and return to us the fully executed agreement. And then we send it back to the subcontractor and set it up in our systems so that we can be ready to invoice. And then after that's all set up, we begin our ongoing subcontract monitoring. So this process is, if you've interacted with subcontracts at all, it can take a long time. And unfortunately, the point that takes the longest is getting it approved by OGC. So once we have the partially executed agreement to when we get the fully back, it can be up to a month. And so usually subcontracts will email us and be like, where is this? And that's when we'll reach out to OGC to try to push that along. And we've done a lot of work in the background to try to improve these processes to make it faster. And the main thing that we're told is as long as we are like submitting accurate subcontracts and everything is orderly and systematic, it'll be more likely that it'll go faster. So our unit is really good at that. We've been told that we're good at this process, and so there's not as much back and forth with OGC, which makes it go a bit faster. So that's the subcontract processing new, and then won't do the other activity, but for an amendment, it's pretty similar. The only difference is that we don't need to do that extra reach out to the subcontract for additional materials. All we need is the new budget if you're adding money, the new budget justification, and then we need either a new scope of work or confirm that the scope of work is the same. For us, all we submit to OGC is the budget, but we do need to make sure that the budget justification and that scope of work are saved in our files. So other than that, the amendment, the process is very similar. For the most part, when we're doing amendments, we are amending money and time, but we can also do amendments if the subcontract PI changes, or if there needs to be a new term, like for reporting on the contract, anything like that can also be amended. And generally, like no cost extension amendments are going to be easier than adding funds and time. So just a few notes about the subcontract budgets that might be a little in the weeds, but I figured I would point them out. So we need to make sure that our subcontract budget that's submitted through FormStack matches what we have in CU data, which means what we have in the project budget. So sometimes when we get that initial budget from the PI, we might notice that it has changed slightly from what was initially proposed, which is expected. Like we can't expect that it's going to be exactly the same as the proposal, but we just need to make sure that it matches, that we change the budget in the system so that it matches, so that we know where the money is coming from and that we have that money in the budget. So that might be some back and forth between us and the PI to have that line up. And then the other reason that this is the third bullet here, but the other reason that we want that to line up is because the CU data actually ties in with marketplace. So when we're collecting invoices, it's going to go against the purchase order, and it's going to show up in CU data what is left in that subcontract. Because it's all tied in. So it's really, that's like the most important part in our budgets, to make sure that everything matches up, because it's really helpful for us to see what we have remaining, and for those purchase orders to actually match what's in the budget. And then some of you might be aware that there's a rule that we only incur F&A on the first $25,000 of a subcontract. So if you're ever looking in depth at a CU data report, you will notice that the subcontract, each subcontract has two unique lines. And so that's just so that the first 25,000 incurs the F&A, and then after that it doesn't. So it's just a way that we account for that rule. But added together, it should equal the full subcontract. And then if the subcontract has automatic carry forward, which should match the parent award. So if the parent award has automatic carry forward, the subcontract should also have automatic carry forward. And that means that when we have an amendment, so when we add a new budget year, we should just be submitting the budget and budget justification for the new funds. So the expectation is that the carry forward is going to be used the same way that it was marketed for the previous project year. It's just available in the current one. But we just want to be looking at the new money, and we will add that to the overall budget. Great. So that's kind of the process, and then going a little bit, back to the monitoring of subcontracts. There's, a few parts that Aaron mentioned, the document retention and then the invoicing that we have already been doing very well that are part of our subcontract monitoring. And so up top here, we have the new subcontract. So we've talked about the scope of work, the budget justification, and then those three other documents there are the ones that we collect when we reach out to a subcontractor after you fill out the initial form stack. And when we amend a subcontract, like I said, we need to confirm the scope of work, we need the budget and the budget justification. And then in every subcontract folder, we should have the RAC that Aaron talked about, every executed agreement and amendment, and all the invoices that have been approved. So these are all documents that we already collect. The RAC was something that we just did like our, I guess, an internal audit review on it, and we made sure that all of our subcontracts now have saved RACs from OGC. And just in case of an audit, we can go back to all of these documents.
Sarah, I was just gonna say one thing about the RAC too is the OGC only does this for new subcontracts. So for amendments, they don't do the RAC again, they just keep the same score. So there, you'll just see one for each subcontractor.
And then the next part of our subcontract monitoring plan that we've already been doing is the invoicing and the invoice tracking. So CAIANH Fiscal reviews and approves all invoices that come in from subcontracts. And then Lisa will send out the DocuSign to the PI with this phrase to confirm that it matches the scope of work and that it is, within reason for what they're supposed to be working on and within budget. So the PI, like Aaron said, is responsible for overall subcontract monitoring. So this is the way that we have you all confirm that it matches the work. Not to say that CAIANH Fiscal does not review invoices very closely. What we're looking for more is that they have enough money in their budget, so that there's enough money remaining in the subcontract, that the invoice is correct, that the period hasn't been billed before, or there's not any mistakes on the invoice with the period. So we're looking more at the fiscal components, and we expect that the PI is reviewing the fiscal components, but more so reviewing the programmatic, that what's on the invoice matches what's actually happening with the work. And then after that DocuSign is signed, then we submit it through accounting, and the invoices are processed that way. And we also have apart from Marketplace, where all these invoices are tracked, we have a very extensive spreadsheet that we track everything, so we can pretty closely see what's going on if there are any questions. And then I think the other thing that happens a lot, or happens sometimes with invoicing, is let's say a PI reviews the DocuSign and reviews the invoice, and there's a question like, oh, actually, I don't know why this expense is here. The question is usually, do does CAIANH Fiscal reach out or does the PI reach out? And for the most part, if it's programmatic, so if the invoice is a lot higher than it was the month before, or if they traveled somewhere that we weren't expecting, or there's a travel expense that we weren't expecting, we'll ask the PI to make that reach out, because that's like, we don't know the answer, we won't know if the answer is helpful or not. But if it's more about the invoice itself or the money, then we'll do that reach out. So it's kind of case by case there, and we're happy to help. But definitely, before you reach out, talk to us, just email us, because we might have had some back and forth in the background that you might not be aware of. So some extra context. And then Erin mentioned this briefly, but we can always. We're always allowed to reach out to the subcontractor for more information on the invoice, and we can and we should be doing that randomly. So if the rack score is this is right. If it's a low score, so if they are low risk, we would periodically reach out just randomly to be like, could you send us the invoice for the more detailed payment summary for or expense summary for this. And then if it is a moderate or high rack score, we would likely put in place a system where they would provide full expense reports every time they send an invoice. And that's happened once before. So it just kind of depends on the rack score. So that is invoicing, and the next part is the scope of work tracking.
So this is the part of this process that Sarah recently developed and updated and is now the gold standard, and it's very exciting. So this is a quarterly scope of work monitoring form that the PI or maybe a delegate would fill out for each subrecipient that they work with on their sponsored projects. We are tracking completion on the back end, and we save all the responses in case there is an audit or we need to look back at the responses. I believe it's set up in the form too that the PI can request a copy of their responses from Smartsheet too. So if you want to see what you said last month and compare for future times, you can also have a record of what you entered. Each form for each subrecipient should take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to complete, so it doesn't need to be a novel every time, but enough detail so we can really get a sense of whether they're meeting expectations. And then if the risk assessment questionnaire is a moderate or high score, we'll work with you to develop an individualized plan to make sure that they are compliant, so we can work with that on a case-by-case basis. So this is what the email will look like that you'll receive once a quarter. It does come from Smartsheet. And so it'll just say, click this link to complete the form. And definitely note that if you have multiple sites, it's all going to come in one email, and there will be multiple forms within one email. So just keep scrolling down through the body of the email, and you'll see a link for each of your sites, and you'll complete the information separately for each site. So then this is what it looks like when you click on the link, the number and then the subrecipient name will be automatically populated for you. And then you will indicate from the dropdown whether they are meeting expectations or whether they are not meeting expectations. And if they are, you'll just have to describe, how you've communicated and worked with them in the last quarter, what that communication has looked like. In-person meetings, phone calls, Zoom meetings, just kind of how you're staying in touch. And then the satisfaction with their use of the funds and their performance goals. So this is really kind of, are they meeting expectations? Are they in line with the deliverables that we're expecting of them? And then if you indicate that they are not meeting expectations of the scope of work, we'll just ask you to describe what are you doing to help them come into compliance? How are you working with them to make sure that they can meet those expectations? And then this will trigger CAIANH fiscal to, if you answer false to that question that they, false being they are not meeting expectations, we will follow up with you to work together to create a plan to make sure that that site can come into compliance. So we'll be alerted about that. And that is it.
And one thing.
Yeah.
For the monthly or the quarterly, we don't expect these to be that different each quarter, so it's definitely reasonable to have them, like to have your answers saved and copy and change them, but a little bit based on the quarter, because we understand that, maybe they're attending weekly meetings or monthly meetings, so things might not change too much, and that's fine. And that's it.
Any questions before we get the last slide? Yeah, Amanda?
I guess like on our end of things, like are we able to like visualize like with the smart sheet, like to monitor, like, oh, they haven't invoiced for anything? Or like are we like on our end able to like visualize that, or?
That's a good question. We don't currently have a process in place. What we do is, and we're every day looking at the invoices that are coming in, and every other month I go through every project and every subcontractor and look to see when the last time the invoice was, and I'll reach out. Most of our contracts do say that they have to invoice not more frequently than once a month, but not less than quarterly. So there's usually they're all closer to a month, but we'll check in with the site if they are not invoicing more frequently, but I don't know, Sarah, if there's anything
I guess
that you want them to do.
we kind of envision this to be separate, because this part is the programmatic and the invoicing is more the finance, and usually when there's finance issues, it's like a miscommunication between billing and projects.
Okay.
So that's why we're the ones that are tracking more whether or not the invoicing is happening monthly. Because it's usually because there's the billing from the other institution is not like working. So I think that, the idea is that program staff are focusing more on project work,
Okay.
and we're focusing more on, are the invoices coming in?
But we would let the PI know if there's like a
If there's a
consistent
lapse.
issue, or if someone's not, like in our PI meetings that we have once a quarter or more regularly sometimes, we will touch base on that and just say, hey, we just reached out to this person, they haven't invoiced in a while, just so everyone's aware of what's going on, but we usually lead that communication.
And there's there's sometimes an overlap, like on one of Jared's projects, they don't work in the summer, so we have to expect that there's not gonna be invoicing, like their invoicing is just a different schedule, so we had to expect that, and that we didn't know until we brought it up with Jared in the meeting, and he was like, oh yeah, that's gonna be a different schedule.
Anybody have another question?
Yeah.
For like PRAs, like what should our role be in this? Like how involved or not involved? And I know I'm sure that probably varies by PI too. But like I guess that's not ever been made clear.
It's up to the PI, so for the default is that the PI is doing this, is the one who's monitoring this, because it falls on them. In some cases, like for CDTR, where the PRA is the one who's interfacing more with the subcontractors, it makes sense to delegate this task specifically. So that's when the PRA would be more involved. So that would be like a conversation that you'd have with Spiro and to see if that is appropriate. And we can set up the smart sheet in a way that the PRA fills out the form and then the PI is still approving it, because we really need to make sure that the PI takes the buck stops with the PI. So that's the added step, is that the PI approves. Am I missing anything?
No, I don't think so. It's a good question.
Yeah, any other questions online or in the room?
Yeah, I guess I do have a question. So, like, I'm just thinking about, like the CDPHE, the PAP project, like, when we have community partners or whatever, and we say that, we're gonna give them a certain amount. So it's not a lump sum that we're giving them at once? So they're invoicing on a regular basis, not just giving them it all upfront?
I think that's a different. I'm not
Are
sure.
they still considered, is
Are
that
they
still
set up as
considered
subcontracts?
subcontracts?
It's not set up yet, but if we wanted to go.
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, no, I think that's a conversation we should have.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think we could do it either way, right?
I think we could do it either way.
Okay.
But we still have monitoring responsibilities.
Yeah.
It just sort of looks different with a lump sum.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we can be really creative. With TG3, we just had this happen where there's like, they're doing the implementation phase of their project. So the whole idea is that they are hands-off.
Mhm.
So a cost reimbursable subcontract wouldn't make any sense because the idea is that they're doing this on their own. That the clinics that they're working with, they're doing this on their own. So we set up a different type of agreement and we worked directly with contracts to draft out a very unique agreement for them. So that they could get, just like you're saying, could get the money up front and then do the implementation part of the project. So just takes a little bit of back and forth with contracts.
Well, I can see where it would work almost better if they're set up to get paid by like meeting certain deliverables.
Well, in my experience, Jen, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It is sort of a mixed bag. First off, if they, by the deliverables requires really close attention and greater intensity of effort to monitor, but it has the great advantage of incentivizing and rewarding completion in a timely fashion. And with some, of our subcontractors, that's recommended in some cases, and others, it isn't as necessary. But on the other hand, with lump sum, we certainly expedite that entire monitoring and disbursement process. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and I really do think, as McKenna said, that need to have careful discussions about that. McKenna, is it possible to have the mechanism vary by the nature of the contractor? Why do I say that? Some contractors, subcontractors, for example, may be more experienced, have better infrastructure, and reliable in meeting a deliverable-driven invoicing process. Denver Indian Health and Family Services comes to mind because they're pretty sophisticated. But others that are more community-based advocacy kinds of groups with little or no fiscal infrastructure, they're less well-positioned to do that in a timely fashion. But they're also at the greatest risk for being monitored and delivering on our expectations. So
I don't, they would have to be all the same for the project, I would think, right?
Yeah, probably. No, depend. It's kind of what the rack is getting at, the questionnaire is getting at, is that question of like how risky the site is and what we can do based on the amount of risk.
But yeah, I would think, I mean, this hasn't come up since I've been here, but I would think we'd wanna apply the same practice to all subcontractors on the same project.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't wanna say one gets a lump sum and then one has to invoice monthly. So, yeah, and I don't think the rack will actually be completed for that, because it's only on federal grants.
That's true.
So we might also consider if there's another way that we wanna assess risk for these partners. So, yeah, I don't know, we'd have to look into that.
Okay.
That's a good question, Spiro.
yeah, that's certainly been the Aim Ahead initiative's challenge. Not in our case so much, but in many other cases with the hubs and cores, when they've had like third or fourth tier level subawardees, as you know, Sarah, particularly, they've not a number of those subawardees just simply don't have the infrastructure and the staffing and the experience to deliver on a regular basis, milestone-based invoicing. So That's been one of the major barriers to the timely submission and expenditure of funds. So,
Yeah, and if it's a small organization, they might not have the capacity to actually be reimbursed for things, right? So, yeah.
and then we encounter frustration from our community partners about, well, we're only getting $10,000 to do this, and we're expending at least that much just in terms of processing and monitoring the expenditures is apart from doing the actual work expected of us. That's the other kind of thing I've experienced is pushback historically from some. So anyway,
Yeah,
just want to make sure we're all aware of those things.
It is a little bit of a dance between trying to, like, one of our goals as the fiscal team is to provide capacity building and support for places that don't have that type of infrastructure, but you can't do it for them. We have to meet in the middle. And so we're always trying to assess the risk versus being able to support of every site. So it's just an ongoing conversation that we have to keep assessing. What's the best way to get these funds to these folks and also meet the aims of the project and also be compliant with federal and university guidelines. So it's not like a switch, like yes or no. It's really a very nuanced conversation.
While trying not to be so burdensome.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, we don't want to be gatekeepers, but we are the gatekeepers, sort of. So.
And yeah, that's another thing that we do sometimes, like, with the TG3 example, it like wasn't really appropriate for me to be the ones reaching out to the clinics because they have the relationship. So we switched the process a little bit so that Monica was the one who was reaching out with the subcontract agreements so that just because they have that trust there. So we're always happy to change things around to like help lessen the burden. And then with that one too, we were able to do it like over the 5 years, but just have a statement because it wasn't a subcontract, but to have a statement that says as long like pending funding coming in, so that we're not having to have that administrative burden every year.
Yeah, so Jen, I could put together like kind of pros and cons list of our different options and send it to you, and then maybe we can meet and just talk through what you're thinking.
That's good.
That's what we got.
Awesome.